Now, for the JRPG mechanic that I think is dope, this is going to be related to trails. And this is a mechanic I don't know if personally I've seen this before, especially done this way. And the mechanic I'm talking about is how the Trails into Reverie game hinted so heavily at Trails through Daybreak, through certain scenes that happen in the game. Now, what I'm going to be talking about in this segment, I'm going to pretty much be going from like very, very, very light spoilers to heavier spoilers as the segment goes on. If you want absolutely no spoilers of the Trails games, I suggest you just skip the segment overall. But I'm going to be starting with, by light spoilers, I mean like the structure of the games. And then by heavy spoilers, I mean like by story spoilers possibly. And I'll say when I spoil, so like you're not going to be surprised. But yeah, pretty much what I want to mention is, or the mechanic I'm talking about is, Trails into Reverie was a game. Obviously, you played with the story. It's very fucking cool. And one of the things in the game is that you get to go into the space called the Reverie, and through the Reverie, you pretty much get to do dungeons, and you get to like unlock some stuff from it, whether it be mini games or characters, or one of the things you can unlock are called daydreams. And what daydreams are is you pretty much get to see cutscenes of moments that happened at some point before the story of Reverie. And they don't necessarily have to be cutscenes. It could be playable. They can be battle-based too. But for example, if there's something that, or if there's a situation that a character went through before the story of Reverie took place, but it was after Trails of Colossia 4, they'll show that. Like you will like be able to experience that story. And they have a bunch of those in the game through the Reverie. And what Reverie, or what the game Trails into Reverie does is, after you beat the main story, they actually have post-story content where you go back into the Reverie and get to unlock more of these daydreams. And a few of these daydreams you unlock don't actually tell stories of the past. They actually tell stories of the future. And pretty much like say I forgot exactly what the day is, but say that the game, that Reverie ends like around January, they'll show daydreams that happened like in March and April and June and things like that. And pretty much what each of those daydreams end up doing is they hint at different aspects of Trails of Daybreak, which is really fucking cool. And this isn't something that I've seen a game do before. And the reason I'm bringing up this mechanic as being so like cool to me at least is this has like, I don't know if I want to say exponentially, but it's made my experience of Daybreak so much better, where I'm pretty much noticing things where it's connecting to the daydreams. And I'm 85 hours into the game, and even still they're getting to points where like they're saying they're showing something and I'm like, oh yeah, this happened in Reverie at the end of one of those daydreams. Like I think the way they did it was very genius. And from here, I'm going to be going more into specific story spoilers, so if you don't want any of that, feel free to kind of head out to the next segment. But I'm going to be talking about some of the daydreams to give examples just so you know what I'm talking about and why I think this is very cool. But one of the examples of the daydream was that they show this character and they don't really show how she looks like. They don't even explain what her name is until the very end, but it's a character named Elaine, and it pretty much goes through her journey of being a bracer, which is kind of like a role in this world, and how she kind of went up to become a bracer, and 6 months in she became really powerful, and how she was being constantly asked to be promoted, how she went through a story of going to the mafia and trying to stop them, trying to save people but they end up getting killed, etc, etc. It's a very intense and very cool insight to who this character is. Then at the end of it they reveal her name is Elaine, and throughout the story you kind of get some story moments where she mentions that, you know, she has this friend with blue hair that she's trying to find. She can't find him, she misses him. She has this other friend who has this more like legitimate job that's more on the side of law. And you just get these little tidbits here and there, and then that's all you get from that. And then once you actually start playing Daybreak, you start to realize that like, oh, you see Elaine pretty soon into the game, but you start putting the puzzle pieces together where like you notice that the blue hair character she's talking about is the main character of Daybreak. So when she was talking about this character that she misses, she's talking about Van, the main character of Daybreak. When she's talking about the friend that has a job which is more like law oriented, she's talking about Renee, which is another friend you have. And I think the most important thing is like if it was just that'd be cool. You already get some context about what's going on. But I think the really cool thing about it is you get these character situations and moments that you just straight up wouldn't get in the main game. So for example, in that daydream, you hear about this entire like story of how she goes to stop this mafia situation. She knocks everyone out, and they describe it beautifully where like straight up they describe her fights with one person, then another one, and it goes through like 7 to 10 people. And then at the end, the thing they kind of reveal is that the villains of the story ended up killing those mafia guys anyways that she tried so hard to knock out and not kill, and that kind of fucks her up. And then yeah, so there's a very deep intense story that you kind of get to see who her character is, and you get none of that in Daybreak, at least so far. I'm 85 hours in, and it makes sense. If they want to do that entire story in Daybreak, they'd really have to give it its own like chapter, which they don't really want to do, especially because it's not even a main character. She's not even part of the main group really. And so the fact that we not only get that context, but we also get like her emotional state towards other characters is very cool too. And what I mean by that is, in the Daydream, they make it very clear that she misses Van. Like she's trying to find Van. She hasn't seen Van in a long time, and she wants to kind of meet him. But when you actually play Daybreak and you start it, and when you're playing Van and you actually meet Elaine, she kind of tells you to fuck off. Like she doesn't like you. She doesn't want anything to do with you, and she's keeping it very strictly professional. She doesn't want to hang out or anything like that. And if you just play Daybreak, you would just see that and you'd be like, okay, I don't know what the relationship is between these two. Does she just fucking hate me? Is she an asshole? Like, what's going on? But if you actually played Reverie and saw the Daydream, you would know, like, no, she actually does care about you. And it's weird because she did want to meet you, but clearly something has happened since then that is making this situation more tense. And so it kind of gives you a completely different context between the relationship. And now that I'm 85 hours in, you are learning a bit more and more about what's happening. They are getting a bit closer and things like that. But even now, I still don't really know why they have such a tense relationship, because they keep referring to something that happened when they were in high school, but we still don't know exactly what happened. So that is just an example of a Daydream where they just give a backstory on a character and the relation she has and how it's so different from the main game, and it just really keeps you thinking on how they're going to evolve the relationship in the main game. And there's like a bunch of other Daydreams. I won't go too deep into these ones because I went pretty deep into that one, but there's one, for example, of Ren, who's a character in the Trails games, of her enrolling into school in Calvard, a kind of a situation she gets into of kind of stopping this asshole and a politician. And in the main game of Daybreak, Ren is there. I already know why she's there because of the Daydream, but they keep referring to that moment a few times here and there in the game where like they'll mention like that politician she took down, and Van mentioned like, yeah, I helped you with that situation where you took down the politician. They even had a side quest which was a continuation of that situation for the Daydream, which would make no fucking sense unless you play the Daydream, which is very cool. And so that's another Daydream. They have another Daydream, but it's probably the most mysterious and probably the one that may not even pay off in this game, where Reen, the main character of the Trails of Cold Steel series, goes to this place called Longline in Calvard. He goes to find a sensei. He meets this ninja group. He kind of fights him. He gets his ass beat by like the princess of the group, and then he just leaves. And then the kind of insinuation of that entire Daydream was that he has to get more powerful for a threat that's going to come into the future. And I'm assuming that's going to pay off in maybe Daybreak 2 or maybe a future game. And 85 hours into the game, only now are we actually going to Longline now. So maybe there's going to be some connections with that, because I'm assuming we're going to be meeting that ninja group. They've already shown characters from them in cutscenes recently, but the fact that it took 85 hours to actually slightly pay off that Daydream of going to Long Lie. And will there be hints of Reen? I'm not sure. Probably not, because that took place beforehand. But again, the Daydreams are just making this game a lot more exciting and making me look forward to certain points where without the Daydreams, the game would still be cool. But the fact that such a simple thing of adding hints to the previous game is making this experience so much more enjoyable is such a cool thing to do, and not a thing that a lot of games do. Trails is one of the series where like you can tell they planned the game so well, where the fact that they could even tease all that stuff in the game before goes to show how well they have everything planned. And that's pretty much all I want to talk about in terms of this mechanic, where hinting the next game and the previous game in these ways where you get more context in certain situations is just very cool. And I would love to see that. Like it would have been very fucking dope if at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 they had like these Daydream type features where they went into some new character that we had no idea who the fuck he was, and only when we play Kingdom Hearts 4 we realize like, oh, this is the character they were talking about, and now we have certain context behind them which you wouldn't ever get in Kingdom Hearts 4. And so that's just an example of like they can really do this in a lot of games, but this probably wouldn't be added to many games because the developers or the creators would just need to have the foresight of the future games, and usually I'm assuming they wouldn't. And yeah, that's a mechanic I really want to talk about and that what I thought was dope.